Okay, today we are working on dynasties. Oh, actually, we're working on BC and AD. So let me move my guy down. BC and AD, before Common Era and Common Era. Okay, what we are really looking at today, even though I'm going to use China and the Chinese dynasties as a kind of an avenue to drive down, we're looking at BC and AD. Okay, what does BC stand for? What does AD stand for? What does BCE stand for? And what does CE stand for? And the fifth thing we're going to look at is sometimes you'll see this little C before a date. Example C500 CE. What does that little C mean? This slideshow is going to be a little interactive, not for me, but for you. I'm not going to click on all the buttons. So if you want to, you can do it on your own and explore it a little bit. But I'll just go straight through the presentation. If you do this presentation on your own, you'll see some things that might be a little bit different for you. Okay, BC. BC is very simple. It stands for before Christ. All kids get that, or most kids do. Okay, now what does AD stand for? Most kids, I hate to say this, but your teachers in elementary school didn't do this correctly. And I don't know why, but AD is not after death. Okay. When we look at the calendars, most calendars from ancient times were built on the reigns of ancient kings and queens. So you'd say what the year of the king's reign was. Some calendars would be very short. King Tut's calendar, he only ruled about 9 to 10 years. He would have a 9 to 10 year calendar. About 12 years ago, I lived in Japan. And in Japan, I believe I was in year 19 on the Japanese calendar because Akihito, the current emperor, he was Hirohito's son. Hirohito was the emperor during World War II. But Akihito had ruled 19 years when I moved to Japan. He has since abdicated the throne, and his son has taken over. And so I think Japan's in like year 1, 2, or 3 of their current calendar. Now they do use the Western calendar, which is the BCAD or BCE and CE calendar. And so they still have the months that we have, and they have the current year too. So they have two calendars that they use. If you are religious, sometimes you'll see different saints' days throughout the year. Some of those saints' days have made it into our popular culture, like Christmas. We'll talk about Christmas later on. Halloween is another saint's day. All Saints' Day, I think it's November 1st. And so we have these different holidays throughout the year. But they would always base their calendars in the ancient times off the king's reign. And so AD stands for Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord. And so Christians will say it is 2020 right now. So Christ has been alive for 2,020 years. Christians will believe that Christ continues to live, and that's why they continue their king's calendar. There is some debate about his actual birth, though, and we'll talk about that later on. It comes up later on in our slideshow. Okay, BCE and CE. Okay, BCE stands for before Common Era, and CE stands for Common Era. Okay, it is still the exact same thing as the BC and AD calendar. When you use it, just be consistent. Okay, I'm not worried if you use BC or BCE or CE and AD. But if you use BCE, use CE. If you use BC, use AD. Okay, this Common Era calendar is kind of a nod or recognizing that the Christian calendar might not be what people want to use, but it really doesn't change much on the calendar. The calendar is still based on the life of Christ. Let me go back. And so they just renamed the calendar. It didn't change anything on the calendar. If they really wanted to make it a common calendar, they probably should have changed the years, changed the dates, but it would be difficult to make a common calendar because we have so many different cultures out there. Even some Christians won't celebrate Christmas or Easter because they don't believe those holidays have Christian meanings. And so there's actually going to be a big debate. If we did start a common calendar, what date would you use to begin that calendar and why? And so this is what we currently have is the before Common Era and the Common Era calendar. If we did change, I'm certain millions of people would still use the BC and AD, which is fine. It's part of their culture. Now, that little C. The little C shows us or tells us what we don't know. Okay, it is from the word circa. Circ, that's CIRC root, goes to circle, circumference, circumnavigate. It means around. Okay, so around this date, around or about. So when you are uncertain of a date, you say C, then the date. Okay, about this date, this happened. It's perfectly fine not to know exactly when something happened because Christ was born circa 1 BC, okay, or circa 6 BC up to 4 AD. We don't know when Christ would have been born. So historically, when you can't pin a date down, you put that little C there and use that. Okay, the Shang dynasty. The Shang were really cool. They were one of the oldest dynasties, but they have found evidence, and you can see right down, and let me turn my pointer on here, down in this area here, the Shang were in the Yangtze River Valley, and they did find evidence in the Yangtze River Valley of the Shang, or a culture before the Shang. It's really sad because when they built the Three Gorges Dam, a lot of those archaeological sites got covered up. And so it's difficult to really dig or do much more archaeological work on that. But they had discovered some of these kings before the Shang and were very interested in finding out more about them. But they're not there, okay? Or they can't do that anymore. Now, when we look at, okay, there is that little C again. Okay, here's our little C. So circa 1,500, then 1,050 BC. Okay, that's from our textbook. About 1,500 BC to 1,000 BC, 1,050 BC, the Shang had a dynasty. We don't know the exact dates because it is so far back there. Okay, there's a lot of dates that will be back in this time frame that we give that C to. Circa 1500 BC actually I think it's about 1200 or 1300. 1300 BC is when King Tut lived. I mentioned him before. Okay, 1200 is also about the time of the Exodus. We can't pin that down. That ranges for about 300 to 400 years. People try to pin that date on the Exodus. And we'll talk about the Exodus later on when we get to Mesopotamia and the Jewish people. But how many years ago was it? 1,500 to 1,050. I'm not going to answer you right now. I'll let you, if you want to, you can come on to this slideshow. I'll put this on Classroom, and you can go through it and write your date down or select your date. Okay? But it was a while ago. Can I move on? Yes, I can. The Zhou Dynasty. Now, the Zhou Dynasty, this is where history, we get a little bit more firm because we start to see how we have more historical records. And so the Zhou, they were about 1,050. So they followed right on the heels of the Shang to about 400 BC. When the Zhou declined, there followed a period of, it's called the Warring States period. And this was a period of civil war for the next couple hundred years where small kingdoms tried to assert their control over most of China or just protect themselves. But when you look at this date, 1,050 to 400, how long is that? Okay, How long did these people last? I'll let you look at that for a bit, and you can come back and give me your answer if you want. The Qin dynasty. Now, Qin is the emperor that gave China his name. Qin Shuangdui. Qin Shuangdui, I think his name is. I have to look at his name up, but I'm not a very good. I don't speak Chinese at all. Now here, look at how long his dynasty was. It was only from circa 221 BC to 206 BC. Not very long at all. It really just focuses in on his life. Qin is the emperor that when he died, he had that the terracotta army built for him, and so he was buried out there in a very big grave with traps to kill grave robbers, with thousands of clay soldiers, an army of clay soldiers. But why would they give? Okay, that's only a few years there. Why would they give a C date to 221? Usually, circa dates are less specific than 221 to 206. Usually, circa dates are like 225 to 210 or something like that. Good morning. And so the dates that you have, okay, they can pin this one down a little bit better. And so 221 to 206, they have some more evidence, but they still aren't quite sure. Maybe that varies a year or two in each direction. They don't have that information. The Han Dynasty. Now, the Han Dynasty are kind of the peak of the ancient world. A lot of people compare the Han to the Roman era. Now, the one reason they do that is because the size of the territory. The Han spread across into Western China, and so east to west, it's very close to that Roman Empire size. Also, the Roman Empire lasted or began around 500 BC and went to about 500 AD, and so they roughly overlap. There is some rumor that some Roman soldiers did end up in Han China. They battled some people in their east on the west of China, so the Roman east and the Chinese west, and they got drawn into China by either losing a war and being captured or some other thing, but they never came back to Rome. It was a lost legion. So look at this. Now their dates span BC 2 AD. And this gets a little bit more tricky. So when you look at this, how long did the Han last? 206 BC to 220 AD. Now, whenever you get a timeline, if you're in doubt about what's going on, draw it out. Okay, give me the timeline, draw it out. And I draw out the Han timeline to help you guys figure this out. I have to get my glasses on because some of that writing is kind of small. Okay. Now, a couple of things before we get to the timeline, because I have the Han here to there. That's how long they lived. Before I get there, though, people who lived in the BC or BCE calendar never called it BC or BCE. Okay, and again, traditional calendars measure the lives of rules of the kings. Okay, BC dates count down to year one. Now, AD dates count up from year one. There is no year zero. Right here it says no year zero because it goes down to 1 BC. Christ is born, and now you're in the first year of Christ. And so that birth, that turning point in Christian history, is the turning point in the calendar. And so, and again, I wrote down here that there's no actual birth date of Christ. No one knows the day. No one knows the month. Nobody knows the year that he was born. And so this is all circa dates. And so Christmas is a holiday. People are so intrusive. Good morning. I already had a couple walk by. Don't worry. My kids never watch this anyhow. It's open. Just like my classroom. People walk through all the time. But so nobody knows when Christ was born. So Christmas is a date that was assigned to Christ. Christmas was actually a pagan holiday. And when the Romans turned Christian, they gave December 25 as the birth date to Christ. So they kept the holiday, but gave a Christian meaning to it. Kind of like the BC and AD calendar was a Christian calendar, and we modern people gave it a more secular meaning to it, the BCE and CE. Now, okay, calendars. Oh, the BCE AD calendar wasn't even created until 525 AD. And so this was created 500 years after the birth of Christ. And that monk who created it had to go back through different calendars that overlapped each other to estimate when Christ was born. The only real clue we have about Christ's birth is Herod the Great. He was the emperor or the king of Judea when Christ was born. So when we look at 206 BC, 206 years before the birth of Christ, and 220 years after the birth of Christ. Okay, so we have to add 206 to 220. You guys can do that on your own. Hopefully, if you guys ever have questions about timelines, you can come back to this, check it out. Have some fun with this. Go back, answer some of the questions. This is not going to be graded. This is just for you to have practice with and to engage. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'll answer you, and we can take care of it. Have a great day. Talk to you guys later.